Thank you. Thank you, Philomena, for starting the session and helping participants in joining the meeting. So with that, we are now at 1 o'clock, so we will start. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all participants who joined us across the globe for this webinar on custom codes to facilitate the implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention. I'm glad to see that we have a lot of participants because we're going to talk about a topic in which we know there's a lot of interest, but that's sometimes quite not fully understood by people who do not work in this area more specifically. My name is Melissa Lim. I'm a program officer in the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Convention, and I lead the work related to custom codes, which I will be explaining to you in the ensuing webinar. And I'm very happy to have with us today as one of our speakers, Mr. Daniel Cardoso, who you can see on your screen right now. And he will be giving you two of the presentations today. And Daniel joined the WCO Secretariat as part of the Tariff and Trade Affairs Directorate in the Nomenclature Subdirectorate. He is currently a senior technical officer and a team leader of the chemical team. Before joining WCO, he was director of the Customs Lab and director of Customs Technique Division in the Customs Administration in Uruguay. Now, Daniel is like a very deep expert in the harmonized system. He has worked on foreign trade control issues for 45 years. In his native country and in the region where Uruguay is found, he has coordinated several national committees on tariff and tariff classification, and also committees and commissions at the regional level. He was involved in the update of the harmonized system in Spanish and contributed to the Spanish version of the explanatory notes for the harmonized systems. He has received the accreditation of WCO expert trainer in the harmonized system in 2015. Thank you very much, Daniel, for joining us today to share some of your expertise.
Thank you very much.
So I will now take you through an introduction of why custom codes are useful for implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. And so I think I'm speaking to an informed audience, but for those who are not aware, the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions are the three international treaties that work together to protect human health and the environment against the adverse effects of hazardous chemicals and waste. And these treaties cover a range of chemicals. In the case of the Rotterdam and Stockholm Convention, there's 55 chemicals regulated in under the Rotterdam Convention and 34 so-called POPs under the Stockholm Conventions. And the Basel Convention covers a range of hazardous waste and other waste that requires special considerations. Now, since these goods are regulated under these conventions are crossing the international frontiers, it is not a surprise that trade-related provisions are inherent to some of the measures that were put in place by parties to mitigate the impact of these goods globally, right? And the Basel Convention, at its core, is a trade-related treaty, and it in fact dictates that there is the prior informed consent procedure for all transboundary movements of hazardous and other waste. So in a nutshell, what this means that export of these types of waste can only happen if there's the consent of the transit and the importing country. And also there are some strict procedures that are put in place to frame these movements. And movements of waste that happen without these procedures are considered as illegal traffic and should be criminalized under national legislation. Similarly, the Rotterdam Convention is also a trade-related treaty, and it puts in place a prior informed consent procedure for for chemicals that are listed in Annex 3 of the convention. And the Stockholm Convention is focuses mostly on closing the tap on POPs, but it also contains some trade-related provisions to restrict the movement of controlled chemicals between parties that have registered for allowed uses. Okay. And so really, if we're talking about international trade, then it is no surprise to anyone that customs has a key role in enforcing these trade-related provisions. And in most countries, they work closely with the other authorities involved in implementation of the BRS conventions. And in addition to enforcement, customs is involved in the monitoring of trade and in the collection of statistics on traded goods. An essential tool that customs make use in undertaking this task is what we call the Harmonized Commodity Description and Coding System, the HS, or more commonly known as custom codes. And the importance of this tool is recognized by the conventions themselves. So Article 13 of the Rotterdam Convention requires that codes are created for Annex 3 chemicals as they become listed, and also that these codes are on the shipping documents that are to accompany the export of listed chemicals.
Sorry, Melissa, I just need
Yes.
to interrupt your conversation now because the thing is that the slide is not moving, and York has just mentioned that we do not see any change in the slide. So are you changing slides or are you just talking?
No, I'm changing slide. I should be on slide 11 now.
Okay, because here we don't see the slide changing.
Okay, which slide do you see now?
The first page on
Oh
custom
dear.
codes. Yes.
You mean all this time I've been only on the first
Yes,
page?
yes.
Well, how can you help, Philo?
Just a second.
Apologies, this doesn't usually happen.
Yeah. Okay, just a second. Let me just give me a second. I'm just trying.
Mm-hmm. Philo, I think it would be, do you manage, or is it easier if I share my screen?
I think it's better if you share your screen.
Okay, so, yeah, well, let me do this now, and I'm on video mode. Share my screen. Let me see how to do this. I cannot share the contents because I'm not a co-host below.
Okay. I'll share the screen for you. Can you see the second page?
No.
You can't see the second page?
No.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we can manually change ourselves the pages. You see up in the middle. Just tell us which slide you're now at the
We are on
moment.
this. Yeah, it's on the first slide, custom codes needs. We are on the first slide, number 1.
Okay.
Philo, can you give me co-host role so I can
Yeah.
share my screen, please?
Yes, I'm just trying to search for your name because now it's not. Is that's host? Okay. Just give me a second. Okay. Okay. There you go. Can you try now, Melissa?
I'll try. Okay. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Can you just move it a little?
Wait a minute.
Yes.
Yes, you can
Yes.
see?
So we have gone back to page 1, system codes, and the first
Yes,
page.
yes, indeed. Okay, hold on. Okay, now we are on the first page. So, apologies for this mishap, but I'll take you back to where we were. So I was saying to you that custom codes are essential tool used by customs for undertaking the important task of monitoring of trade and statistic and enforcement of the trade-related provisions. And that in the Rotterdam Convention, it's recognized that such codes are important and should be developed for newly listed chemicals. And I'm glad to say that such codes do exist for most chemicals listed under the Rotterdam Convention. And since the majority of POPs, that is chemicals listed under the Stockholm Convention, are also listed under the Rotterdam Convention, it means that we have codes for these chemicals. Now, when we turn to waste, codes for waste, there's also been an interest since the early days of the Basel Convention for obtaining such codes. Now, there are, however, more than 60 waste types that are listed in Annex 8 of the Basel Convention. So these are wastes that are considered, presumed to be hazardous. And as I will explain later in a subsequent presentation, there's actually not as many codes for these wastes. And we're going to, you will get to understand as we go through some of the reason for this lack of congruence. Okay. So the latest request from the Basel Convention COP was in decision 14/9, where there was a request for 13 waste types. And I will explain to you later the progress we have made in obtaining codes for these waste. One of them that I have highlighted here is plastic waste. And this request came as a result of the amendment to the convention in 2019 in decision 14/12, which is what we call the plastic waste amendment, which broadened the scope of plastic waste that are subject to the prior informed consent procedure. And Another result of this amendment was the establishment of the Plastic Waste Partnership, which has as its objective to improve and promote the environmentally sound management of plastic waste. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is that there has been a specific project group established under this partnership to support the implementation of the plastic waste amendments and specifically on transboundary movement of plastic waste. And as part of its activities, this project group has developed a fact sheet on custom codes for plastic waste in collaboration with WCO, Daniel, who I have introduced earlier, was the lead author on this fact sheet, and he will be explaining to you its content in our webinar today. So up next, after this brief introduction, Daniel will be going in depth into what the harmonized system is and what it takes to create new custom codes. After which I'll be giving you some more details about chemicals, about the progress in creating new codes for chemicals and waste listed under BRS. And then we'll turn back to Daniel to explain to you how plastic weights are classified under the harmonized system. And then we can have some time for questions and answers. But maybe time permitting, we can break after the next presentation to take a few questions. So without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen and give the floor to Daniel for his presentations on the harmonized system. Daniel, please.
Yes, let me now share my screen. Okay. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, we can.
That's great. Great. Well, good morning, everyone. I was invited by Melissa to speak about the HS codes and the Harmonized System Convention just from the beginning. Basically, we will see that the Harmonized System is a nomenclature used to identify traded goods around the world. The nomenclature is part of the Harmonized System Convention. We will see that members to the Harmonized System Convention has rights and obligations, and how this nomenclature is structured, and how the Harmonized System is amended, and new codes are created throughout the time. Customs and tariffs existed since the first government. Initially, this tariff contained a list of goods and the levy, the tax to pay. So in this slide, you can see an example of how old nomenclatures are. In this papyrus from showing an Egyptian custom tariff dating back 2,000 years BC. This simple list of goods were evolving throughout the years as new and more complex goods were traded. So in 1931, the League of Nations produced the Geneva nomenclature, basically the first precursor of the Harmonized System. In 1959, the Brussels tariff nomenclature entered into force, and it was renamed in 1974 as the Customs Cooperation Council nomenclature. However, as time went by, it was felt by governments, statisticians, and trade community that the nomenclature at that time did not sufficiently meet the trade needs. So in early 1970, the Customs Cooperation Council set up an inter-organizational study group to examine the possibility of preparing the harmonized system. And in 1983, the draft Harmonized System Convention was approved by the Council and was open for signature, and the Harmonized System Convention entered into force in 1988. And since its implementation, the Harmonized System has been updated 7 times, including the latest 2022 amendment. So the Harmonized System Convention official name is the International Convention on the Harmonized Commodity Description and Coded System. The Harmonized System is a multi-purpose goods nomenclature developed by the World Customs Organization. As of today, there are 161 contracting parties, comprising 160 countries and the European Union, that is one member, but the European Union brings also 27 additional countries. It is used as a basis for customs tariff and trade statistics by more than 200 countries and customs or economic unions around the world. This means that more than 98% of the world trade are classified under the Harmonized System. And basically, the Harmonized System is a universal economic language and code for these traded goods that turns the concept of the good into a 6-digit code. The primary objectives of the Harmonized System Convention was to facilitate international trade and the collection, comparison, and analysis of statistics by harmonizing the description, classification, and coding of the traded goods. And in addition, it was intended to facilitate standardization of trade documents and transmission of data, and thereby reduce the expense of the trade, the cost of trade. So as noted earlier, the Harmonized System is a multi-purpose tool, and this is because the Harmonized System has been well drafted in accordance with its objectives, and therefore its use is not confined only to custom tariff. It is also used for many other purposes. Just to name a few, it serves as the basis for the custom tariff in all customs administration, also for the collection of international trade statistics, but also, for example, for following environmental matters, which does include trading products that are harmful but also beneficial for the environment. It is used as the basis for the rule of origins, for the collection of national taxes, for trade negotiations, the WTO schedule of tariff concessions and free trade agreements use the Harmonized System Codes. They are used also as basis for the transport tariff and statistics for transportation, and also for monitoring control goods, waste, narcotics, chemical weapons, ozone layer, depleting substances, and endangered species. And it is used as a vital element of core custom processes areas on custom controls, procedures, the establishment of risk assessment, information technology, and compliance. Basically, this Harmonized System Convention consists of a preamble, 20 articles, and an annex. This preamble set out why the international community supported the adoption of the Harmonized System. The 20 articles provide provision for obligations of contracting parties, function of the Council, and how the Harmonized System Committee will manage the Harmonized System, the settlement of dispute between contracting parties, and the amendment procedure. And the annex of the convention is basically the nomenclature, the Harmonized System, which is actually the core of the actual classification of commodities. The Harmonized System Convention in Articles 3 and 16 defines certain obligation of contracting parties. For example, all contracting parties must bring the tariff and statistical nomenclatures into conformity with the Harmonized System at 6-digit level. So the headings, subheadings, the notes, and the rules for classification for all contracting parties are the same at 6-digit level. And also contracting parties must accept all the amendments of the Harmonized System as well. And they are obliged to make publicly available their imports and export in trade statistics in conformity with these 6-digit codes. And they may publish the statistics beyond the level of that level if they wish. So articles 5, 6, 8, and 16 describe the rights of the contracting parties. For instance, developing countries contracting parties can get technical assistance in respect of, among others, training, transposing the existing nomenclatures to the harmonized system in according to the provision of the convention. Contracting parties are entitled to become member of the Harmonized System Committee, its subcommittees and working party. And they can also make, they have the right to make proposals and to raise questions to the Harmonized System Committee. And also they have the right to one vote. All the members of the European Union, for example, together they exercise only the right of one vote. And the contracting parties have the right to notify objections, in other words, to enter reservations in respect of the proposals for the amendments of the convention and the amendments to certain recommendations by the Council. And Article 6 establishes the Harmonized System Committee, which is composed of representatives of the contracting parties, and the function of this committee are further described in Article 7. This Harmonized System Committee can set up subcommittees or working parties that help in their work, and accordingly to these provisions, 4 working bodies have been established for the harmonized system related matters. We have the Harmonized System Committee, the Harmonized System Committee Working Party, the Review Subcommittee, and the Scientific Subcommittee. The Harmonized System Committee is composed of the representatives of the contracting parties to the Harmonized System Convention. Members of the Council, which are not contracting parties, also may attend the Harmonized System Committee as observers. The Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention have been invited several times to present their arguments in the Harmonized System Committee when they are requested to open specific subheadings to control waste and chemicals. And as I said before, the Harmonized System Committee provides the right to contracting parties to one vote. And the Harmonized System Committee normally has 2 sessions in a year, generally in March and September. Since 1988, it had 73 sessions. The next session will be next week, in March 2024. The Harmonized System Committee's major functions are to ensure the uniform interpretation and application of the harmonized system, to settle classification disputes between contracting parties, and to update the harmonized system. So in other words, the Harmonized System Committee deals with the nomenclature itself, for the amendments, to the explanatory notes amendment, which contains the explanation and the scope of these harmonized system codes, for the publication of classification opinions, recommendations, for classification questions, including the dispute, and general questions and policy matters relating to the harmonized system. In regard to the subcommittees, the Harmonized System Committee Working Party is in charge of finalizing the draft amendments to the nomenclature, the explanatory notes and classification opinions before their adoption by the Harmonized System Committee, and usually meets immediately before the Harmonized System Committee. The Review Subcommittee also is in charge of proposing amendments to the legal text and consequential amendments to the explanatory notes. It meets twice a year, in May and in November. And the Scientific Subcommittee assists the Harmonized System Committee and other WCO committees with regard to classification of chemicals and other scientific matters, and is made up of chemists, of member administrations, of custom laboratories, and it meets once per year, normally in January. So the structure of the harmonized system is basically the harmonized system. The nomenclature is the annex of the Harmonized System Convention. The nomenclature is not a list of all traded goods, but basically a system for grouping commodities, and all traded goods are classified specifically or belonging to certain groups in the nomenclature. So traded goods are divided into 21 sections and 97 chapters, although chapter 77 is reserved for future modifications. Therefore, we have, in fact, 96 chapters, and each chapter contains 4-digit headings, and each heading is subdivided in 5 or 6-digit subheadings. In the nomenclature, the current nomenclature 2022, it has 1,228 headings and 5,612 subheadings, and the classification of goods is based in 6 general rules, which is called general interpretative rules. It's based on legal notes, which are notes from section, chapters, and subheading notes. This is an example, an excerpt of the nomenclature. Basically, it's from section 4, it's chapter 18, which refers to cocoa and its preparations. In the first column, in bold, you can see the 4-digit codes. In the second column, the subheadings, 6-digit subheadings. And in the third column, the text describing the scope of headings and subheadings. So since its first edition in 1988, the Harmonized System has been amended 6 times, generally every 5 years, to keep up with the current requirements. On the slide, you can see also the years of the amendments and the number of amendments and HS codes for each different edition. The next amendment will occur in 2028. So why the Harmonized System is amended? So there are various triggers. For example, changes in technology and new products is one of the major reasons for amendments. The Harmonized System is a system for classifying goods. So as goods are born, emerge, and change, it should be possible to reflect these changes in trade. In 2082, for instance, in the current version, the creation of the heading 8485, for example, for 3D printers, is an example of new products that appear on the market. There are also changes in trade patterns and volume, which also trigger amendments for more practical customs and statistics management. For example, subheading 490510 for gloves was deleted in the current version in 2022 because the low volume of trade, people, of course, using more Google Maps than these gloves, and this is why certain subheadings are deleted. We also need amendments where clarification or simplification of particular HS provisions is required. In HS 2022, a new note 15 to section 11 has been created to clarify the classification of electronic textiles which were appearing in the market. Environmental, security, or social concerns also trigger amendments because the Harmonized System is a useful tool for monitoring and control certain goods covered by international conventions or agreements. The amendment of heading 2903 and the creation of heading 3827 is an example of related to the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol to protect the ozone layer. So basically, in the Harmonized System amendments, to create or delete codes, there are certain monetary thresholds values which are agreed by the committee, and therefore for opening or deleting, let's say a subheading, you need a trade of at least 50 million US dollars, and for a heading, it is necessary to have a trade of 100 million US dollars. There are, of course, certain, in each review cycle, the Harmonized System examines the deletion of the HS code for goods which are traded below these threshold values, but there are certain exceptions for these thresholds. products of social or environmental importance, products of importance for developing countries, residual headings or subheadings whose deletion could adversely affect the structure of the harmonized system or lead to classification problems, and also any subheading whose retention is requested by contracting parties. The harmonized system codes of these products can be created or retained even if the trade volume is below these thresholds. So it is useful to know the process, the review process and the timelines to present proposal. First, the harmonized system contracting parties or international organizations such as the Basel, Rotterdam Convention, etc., can submit amendments proposals to the World Customs Organization. The W Secretariat can also submit proposals, and the submitted proposals are placed in working documents and are sent by the WCO Secretariat to the Harmonized System Review Subcommittee, which is in charge of the examination of the review of the harmonized system. The speed of the review of a particular proposal depends largely on the scope of the proposal and the complications, and also international consensus is needed on the proposed amendments. If the proposal is a simple one, the review subcommittee may accept this proposal in the first review, but it's more common that the proposals are subjected to an initial review and then discussed further on the other sessions, on subsequent sessions, until a decision is made. Or they provide time to contracting parties to connect to the national industry, to interested government agents to have an agreement, and the review subcommittee, when finalized the drafting of the amendment, it sends the agreed proposal to the harmonized system for approval. So the harmonized system is a voting body, and for a proposal to be approved by the harmonized system committee, it must achieve at least 2/3 majority of the votes cast. At the end of the review cycle, the aggregate amendments, as I said, in the form of a draft recommendation, are presented to the WCO Council for final approval. And then the Council approves the overall package of amendments on a consensus basis, and then notify the contracting parties of the recommended amendment. And the Council is the highest decision-making body of the WCO, composed of heads of the customs administrations. According to the Harmonized System Convention, the amendments accepted by the Council will later enter into force, usually 2.5 years after the notification. So to show the overall timeline, let's take the case for the next 2028 amendment. So the review subcommittee will finalize the examination of all proposals in November 2024. And therefore, there is time until that time to present proposals. Then the Harmonized System Committee will adopt the amendment in March 2025, and the Council will approve and notify the recommended amendment in June 2025 for entry into force in January 2028. Therefore, this is the last year to submit proposals for opening new HS codes, and if approved, it will be implemented in January 2028. Because the Basel Convention regulates movements across international borders, its effective implementation by national customs authorities is essential to ensure compliance. So customs authorities can control the movement of the documents and the consent, including whether the type of waste that is being traded is in conformity with the movement documents. So customs authorities for that use the harmonized system to identify specific chemicals and waste, to check if a license is required, to monitor trade, and to collect information on import and export. And in addition, the Harmonized System Codes are used for enforcement purposes, targeting containers, and how to conduct risk analysis on the cargo that arrives to the country. Well, I hope you have a better information now on how the HS codes are created and why they are used to control trade. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel. We've heard from your presentation that the harmonized system is actually a complex classification system that regulates or that covers in its scope all goods in trade, right? And it's a dynamic system, and its a review actually takes quite some time. I will open the floor to questions to Daniel if there's anyone who has something to ask right now. Please raise your hands and I will give you the floor. Okay. Well, I see there's a question here in the chat and I'll read it out. It's from Peter Maxson, and it says, in order to provide a fuller appreciation of the value of the HS trade statistics, could you please explain why the mirror trade statistics are so often inconsistent?
This is a very valid question, because in certain conventions which monitor, for instance, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, when they want to control that the import declared is the same that the export received by countries, normally when you look at the declaration of countries and the trade statistics, the values are not the same. This may be caused by many, many things. There are clerical errors, for instance. There are different HS codes declared because of ignorance or because or just for purpose. There are other episodes of the definition of import and exports, because sometimes when the physical movement is through a free trade area, sometimes the country do not define this physical movement as an import, but define this physical movement from one country to a free trade area as basically a transit, and the goods arrive at the country, but is not accounted for as an import. So all these different problems may create certain discrepancies in trade statistics, of course, in the declarations of the values of the volumes that are traded.
Thank you. And I see another question. Well, I see one here, which is, could you implement some subheadings for waste separate from product in order to be able to control better transboundary movements of waste? Daniel, I think we will maybe take this question at the end after we go through the other presentations.
The answer is yes, and we have done this.
Yes, and then there's another one. Is there any guide to be able to code products with pop content? That is difficult to find them in the tariff when making inventories.
This is one problem for plastics specifically, because sometimes plastics, let's say, are declared because of the nature of the plastic, let's say polyethylene or whatever, but regardless of the content of chemicals which are inside the plastic. So it is not possible to to find codes from substances which are contained in a product. Basically, the harmonized system classify the product, but not the product that they contain. For instance, I don't know, let's suppose that you have a meal that contains salt, contain tomato, but it is classified as a meal, not as the particular goods they contain, the particular substances they contain. And therefore, it is very difficult to do that, almost impossible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't see any more questions and no hands raised. Daniel, I think it was very important that you explained that the code is designed to ensure uniform classification. Could you also explain what happens in the 2.5 years that follows adoption by the council? Why is 2.5 years needed until entry into force of the HS?
Yeah, this is some people believe that 2.5 years is too much, but basically, if you know the work that is implied, you will say that is not too much. Basically, many countries are not able also to have all the work done in this 2.5 years. So basically, 6 months are taken because we need to wait if there is a reservation for the recommendation. And also the 2 other years that remains is used by the customs administrations to basically enact new legislation, to modify the customs software, to modify the tariff in each country. So it's a lot of work to do to modify the taxes, whatever, and to train customs officers for the recognition of this new amendment. So 2.5 years, although it may seem a lot of time, really is not. And of course, the WCO Secretariat works a lot to update the document, the new nomenclature, the new explanatory notes. It's a lot of work to do, really.
Thank you, Daniel. Can you explain what the explanatory notes are? Because I'm not sure this was covered in the presentation.
Yes. Basically, the scope of each of the headings, the meaning of certain words or certain definitions are better explained in another, let's say, text, which is called the explanatory notes. Is the reflection of the Harmonized System Committee on the scope of the text of the headings and subheadings.
And this text is not legally binding, correct?
This text or nomenclature is legally binding, and the main difference is that for most countries, the text of the explanatory notes is not legally binding, but certain countries make the text legally binding.
Okay, thank you. I think I will take one last question and then we will continue, because some of the questions I see asked are will be maybe answered in the following presentations. So here Elena D'Angelo asks, are you considering to develop HS codes for secondhand products? This can be a challenge for particular waste streams. And here she gives the example of e-waste.
It's a particular challenge, not only for e-waste, but also for recover materials. So if you, for recycled plastic, for instance, if you want to import a second-hand car, it may be evident that it's used, but in terms of chemical products or recycled products, the distinction is not really simple. And sometimes there are difficulties in basically the circular economy to consider whether something is second-hand product. Sometimes we have certain HS code for second-hand products, like used textile materials or something like that. But for recover or recycle chemical is really a challenge, because when it's recycled, it's like a new chemical, like the same chemical. So you cannot distinguish whether it was recycled or not.
Thank you, Daniel. So now, after this great introduction and tour of what the harmonized system is and what it takes to change it, I will take you through the progress that we have achieved in recent times on getting new codes for chemicals and waste that are regulated under BRS. So for that, I will need to share my screen. Right, Philo?
Yes, Melissa.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. Mm-hmm. Bear with me 1 second. Yes, that should be it. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So if you recall, Article 13 of the Rotterdam Convention requests that new codes are developed for chemicals listed in Annex 3, and that the shipping documents for such chemical bear these codes when exported. And as explained to you, there is a very well-defined process for amending the harmonized system. And this is what is outlined here is what we follow in the Secretariat following adoption of new chemicals in Annex 3 by the Conference of the Parties to the Rotterdam Convention. So we develop a proposal in consultation with the WCO Secretariat, and then this is submitted for consideration by the Harmonized System Review Subcommittee. And as explained by Daniel, depending on the complexity of the proposal, it can take very short time, like 6 months. 1 year, 6 months to 1 year for approval, or it can go through several meetings of the committee. And usually, when it comes to chemicals, it's also considered by the scientific subcommittee. And eventually, after agreement by the review subcommittee, it would be adopted by the Harmonized System Committee and eventually approved by the WCO Council. And so if all goes well, then the next edition of the Harmonized System will contain new codes for these chemicals. Okay, so as I've explained, we now have codes for the majority of chemicals listed, and you can find this on the website of the Rotterdam Convention at the link shown on the screen here. Similarly, because the majority of POPs are listed under the Rotterdam Convention, albeit with a slight delay, we will eventually also have codes for most POPs. And so in recent years, we have asked for codes for HBCD, borate, decaBDA, PFO, and their salts. And all these have been agreed and codes approved for inclusion in Chapter 29. Well, still subject to approval by the WCO Council, but if all goes well, again, there will be those codes in Chapter 29 for pure chemicals in HS 2028, and also in Chapter 38 for mixtures and for pesticides formulations. We have made a recent request for tabufos, and this will be considered by the review subcommittee in its next meeting in June. Again, so there's a chance that we will have codes for taboo first in HS 2028. The Secretariat provides a report on progress in its work on getting new codes for Rotterdam Convention listed chemicals, and you can find the latest report listed here on the website of the convention, in case you want to find out more details. Now, let's turn to Basel Convention wastes. And as I've shown you before, in decision BC 14/9, there was a request for 13 waste code types for which codes were needed by parties. Now, I'm just listing the ones here which were considered of higher priority. And out of these, we were able to obtain codes for e-waste already several years ago, and these were included in HS 2022, which came into force in January 2022. So this is in chapter 85. At the same time, well, as part of the codes for e-waste, there were codes for waste lead acid batteries, which is one of the waste stream most widely traded in the world, and which are under for which the environmentally sound management is now being discussed under the Basel Convention. Now, for the 7th review cycle, we were successful in developing proposals and getting agreement by the review subcommittee for waste mineral oil containing more than 50 milligrams per kilo of PCB. So this has been agreed by the review subcommittee and agreed by the Harmonized System Committee. Then we were able to devise proposal and obtaining agreement by the review subcommittee for plastic waste and for waste pneumatic tires. And so these amendments will be considered by the Harmonized System Committee at its meeting next week. Again, so all these changes are pending approval by the WCO Council. And then, as Daniel has explained, will be included in HS 2028 if there's no objection within 6 months of this approval by the Council. The Secretariat provides a report to the Conference of the Party on its work in obtaining these amendments to the Harmonized System. And the latest report was provided to COP16, and you can obtain this on the website of the convention. And so maybe you're thinking that there are 13 waste types, but we've only managed to get codes for five waste types, and this progress might seem rather slow. But just let me highlight that the first request for codes for e-waste was made 20 years ago. And as Daniel has explained, in part, why the review process of the harmonized system takes so long. It takes 5 years, usually, and there needs to be a lot of consultation at the national level for any changes to this code, which is implemented internationally. Also, as Daniel explained, the more complex the proposal, of course, the longer it takes for the committee to consider and discuss. And then, and we heard from some of the questions that were asked to Daniel about some of the difficulties that you maybe can guess about obtaining codes for waste, because and there are several reasons why this is more challenging than for chemicals. when we're talking about chemicals, the chemicals are very well described, and it's using a nomenclature that's internationally agreed, right? So there's very little question about what we're talking about. We have CAS numbers, we have usually and full descriptions of the chemicals. However, when we look at how wastes are described under the Basel Convention, and so these are the remaining wastes that for which codes are requested by parties in decision 14/9, you can see that for some of these waste types, we are not speaking about the waste of a specific product, but we're talking about broad categories of waste. For example, the one highlighted here, A4010, we're looking at waste from the production, formulation, and use of biocides and pharmaceuticals. Noting that the convention doesn't provide any specific definition of what is a biocide or a phytopharmaceutical. So these broad definition of waste is one reason why it is challenging to obtain specific codes for them, right? And looking more generally, right, as Daniel has explained, the harmonized system has in its scope commodities, and it has a whole set of notes in the legal text supported by the explanatory text to define specifically what these commodities are. And this is defined for broadly speaking in physical and technical characteristics, with the aim of uniformity in the classification of these goods. On the other hand, the scope of the Basel Convention is wastes instead of commodities. And as I've shown you, the way the wastes are described can sometimes be very broad. Also, in terms of definition of waste itself, the definition is based on the intent of the disposer. It's based on the disposal operation, Annex 4, with what makes a waste. And also, if we're talking about hazardous characteristics here, there's a series of, in Annex 3, which also involves testing, which are not necessarily internationally agreed. So therein lies some of the, let's say, incompatibilities between these two nomenclatures, which makes it challenging to devise proposal for these codes and then, of course, have them considered and agreed to by the Harmonized System Committee. Having said that, the Secretariat will continue to devise new codes for consideration during the 8th review cycle of the Harmonized System. And because of these challenges that I have just highlighted, we will need more information from parties and stakeholders about what are the specific wastes for which codes are needed. So we are preparing to issue a call of information in order to devise these proposals. When coming to chemicals under the Rotterdam Convention, we will see what happens at the next conference of the parties meeting in 2025. And if there are new chemicals listed, we will proceed with requesting codes. And for the 7th review cycle, of course, for those codes of the Basel Convention that do get agreed to, then we will also help the committee with the preparation of the explanatory notes that will help implementation of HS 2028. I'd like to draw your attention to another decision related to custom codes, and this is the one on preventing and combating illegal traffic. And as part of this decision, the Secretariat has been asked to explore the needs related to amending the HS to identify substances and products that contain chemicals listed under the Stockholm Convention. Someone has already hinted at the difficulty entailed there, and we will probably be reaching out to parties to find out more what these needs are. With that, then I leave you with my email here in case you have any questions on the details of the codes. Feel free to reach out to me. So with that, I will pass the floor back now to Daniel so that he can now go into more detail about plastic waste and how these are encoded in the harmonized system. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm going to once again try to share the screen. It's okay? Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Just to reflect a little in more of what you have said, Melissa, sometimes conventions to once they are agreed, they need to be implemented and enforced in many cases. So it is necessary to have defined terms. And sometimes the Basel Convention does not have defined terms which allows a proper implementation on the establishment of HS codes. As you have seen in my previous intervention, almost all trade in the world is classified under the harmonized system when it crosses international borders. And I'm going to present now, let me see, yeah. This presentation is based on the fact sheet developed under the Plastic Waste Partnership to support the implementation of the plastic waste amendments, which were adopted in the decision BC 14/12 by the Conference of Parties to the Basel Convention. The fact sheet was intended to provide an overview of the harmonized system codes relevant for monitoring the transboundary movement of plastic waste. So we'll try to introduce the concept of the fact sheet, showing an overview of the section 7, chapter 39, referring to plastics and articles thereof. We will see how plastics and specifically plastic waste are defined in the harmonized system and their relationship of the relevant HS codes to the amendment to the Basel Convention on Plastic Waste. The fact sheet also contains an introduction to the harmonized system that was already provided in my previous presentation. Now, let's talk about trading plastics, including plastic waste. In this slide, you have two imaginary countries. You have a country A, country B, that trade certain products, and let's focus on the trade of plastics. Basically, the list of plastic products that can be traded internationally is enormous, is big, and it includes plastic in primary forms, either virgin or with color, that after the importation could be used in a factory in a country B to produce other articles of plastic, such as bottles, plastic films, containers for food, that will be used for packaging, to wrap or transport other goods to be traded in the country, also to be exported. Now, plastic in primary forms would also be used to produce woven or non-woven fabrics, plastic garments, nets, construction materials, electrical and electronic goods, paints, similar articles made of polymers, automobile parts, etc. So I cannot add all these pictures to this slide, but you can imagine the number of plastic products that can be produced and traded. At the end of the life cycle, all these articles made of plastic become a plastic waste. And therefore, some plastic waste can be ground into smaller pieces or block of irregular shape or flakes, and then could be also recycled into granule or pellets to make basically more products of plastic. At any stage in all these articles could be produced in country A or country B and could also be exported. So what I want to convey here with this slide is that only the goods which are internationally traded in this slide is represented by these blue arrows. Only when they are traded is possible to control, collect information, and prohibit such trade while crossing the borders using the Harmonized System Codes. It may be possible to gather in-country information and to control production or waste in the goods if the goods are not internationally traded, but using another ways I know the HS codes. This is the limitation of the HS code, that you can use it when you have international trade. Let's see what the specific HS code for plastic and in particular plastic weights are. In the Harmonized System, most plastic products, including plastic waste, are included in Chapter 39, which cover polymers presented in primary forms, semi-manufactures of plastic, such as sheet, tubes, articles made of plastic materials. You should be aware that Chapter 39 does not cover all articles made of plastic materials because Note 2 to Chapter 39 also mention other articles which are excluded. For instance, we have textiles, footwear, electrical appliances made of plastic, particles of vehicles made of plastic, furniture, toys made of plastics. They are classified in other chapters in the Harmonized System. I also have seen a common mistake in certain articles published on the internet that includes synthetic rubber as plastic, but rubber products are not considered plastic in the Harmonized System, but they are classified in Chapter 40. And Chapter 39, which covers, let's say, the plastic is certain plastic is divided into two subchapters. Subchapter 1 contains all plastic presented in primary forms, and subchapter 2 contains waste, semi-manufactures, and articles made of plastic. In the Harmonized System, some expressions that we will use are well defined. For instance, the expression plastics is defined in Note 1 to Chapter 39, as you can see on the slide. In regard to plastic also, which are also called polymers, all of them, including the ones mentioned in the Basel Convention, for instance, in Y48, presented in primary forms, are classified in headings 3901 to 3914. So the table that you can see on the slide include HS code, some at 4-digit level, which will require more information. For example, polyethylene is classified in heading 3901, but low density polyethylene, LDPE, is classified in subheading 390110, and high density polyethylene is classified in subheading 390120. The way polymers can be presented as raw materials is called primary forms, and the expression is defined in Note 6 to Chapter 39. So in general, the machines that make plastic articles use plastic presented in pellets or in powder forms. Plastic presented in liquids are more preferred to prepare paints, mastics, glues, etc. So semi-manufactures made of plastic materials such as pipe, tubes, sheets, or fins are classified in heading 3916, 3921. Articles of plastic such as boxes are classified in heading 3922 to 3926. And heading 3915 relates to waste, pairing, and scrap of plastics. As you can see from the slide, the definition of waste by the Basel Convention can be different in different countries because they are in accordance to the provision of the different national laws. For the harmonized system, for custom purposes, plastic waste are referred mostly to broken or worn articles of plastic which are clearly not usable for their original purposes, or manufacturing waste such as shavings, dust, or trimmings. The relevant subheadings for identifying plastic waste in heading 3915 are the ones that are shown on the slide. Currently, in the 2022 amendment, there are only 3 specific codes for plastic waste consisting almost exclusively of polyethylene, 391510, of plastic waste consisting almost exclusively polyester, and plastic waste consisting of PVC, which is classified in 390530. All other plastic waste mentioned in Y48 are classified in subheading 391590. So the term almost exclusively using the Basel Convention has not been agreed yet. So for example, waste containing 90% polyester and 10% ABS could be considered as containing almost exclusively polyester. This is a question for the harmonized system. This is a mixture and should be classified in subheading 391590 and not in 391520. To better understand the scope of the meaning of plastic waste in the harmonized system, I need to refer to 2 terms, the term thermoplastic and thermosetting, which are defined in the explanatory notes to chapter 39. So if a material of this chapter of plastic could be softened repeatedly by heat treatment and shaped into articles, let's say by molding or blowing, and then hardened by cooling, these plastics are called thermoplastics. Examples are polyethylene, polypropylene, polyester. So it can also, certain kind of plastic can be transformed into an unfusible product by chemical or physical means, by heat. And this type of plastic are called thermosetting. And examples are urea, phenol, and melamine, formaldehyde resins. So they are not reversible by heat. Why I'm bringing this up? Because heading 3915 covers waste, pairing, and scrap consisting of 3 different things. Consisting of any single thermosetting material in any form, for example, a broken bowl of melamine, as you can see on the slide, of any single thermoplastic material, provided that has not been broken down into primary forms, which is note 7 to chapter 39, which I'm going to explain. And also waste, plastic waste could be 2 or more thermoplastic materials mixed together in any form as shown on the picture below. So the 2 plastic waste shown in these pictures are classified in subheading 391590. In regard to the second bullet in blue, according to the note 7 to chapter 39, the heading does not apply, so they are not considered waste if this is a single thermoplastic material transformed into primary forms of heading 3901 to 3914. So remember that primary forms could be pellets or blocks of irregular shape. So I'm going to show you examples on the meaning of plastic waste for custom purposes. In this slide, I will explain the second bullet. If wastes are composed of a single thermoplastic material, for instance, an empty and use bottle of PET and imported as such. These bottles are considered to be plastic waste and classified in subheading 391590, as you can see on the photo of these bottles on your left. Okay, those are wastes. But if the bottles are further processed by breaking them into smaller pieces in the form of this block of irregular shape that you can see at your right, by turning them into granules, then it becomes a plastic in primary forms. And therefore, it should be classified not as a waste, but as a PET of subheading 390761. This is consistent with the standard practice because once the waste has been recycled into primary forms, adding value during the process, the waste for custom purposes is not considered a waste anymore, and it can be used to produce more plastic articles, okay? Another practical example, if these PET bottles, together with the polypropylene lids, are further processed by breaking them into smaller pieces in the form of block of irregular shape, then this will be a mixture of PET and polypropylene, and therefore this note 7 that I was mentioning does not apply, as the final product is not a single thermoplastic material, but a mixture of plastic. The mixture is considered a waste and classified in subheading 391590. As international 6-digit level, we have said that except for waste of polyethylene, polyester, and PVC, most plastic waste is classified in subheading 391590. The Basel Convention is discussing, as it was shown by Melissa, a proposal to modify this heading 3915 to add more specific HS code for plastic waste, but to reproduce the amendments to the Annex 2, 8, and 9 of the Basel Convention. So these amendments, if approved in March this year, will be implemented in 2028. What to do until then? So countries or regions wanted to specifically identify other type of waste for controlling purposes, such as plastic waste almost exclusively consisting of PET or polycarbonate, etc., can open specific national or regional subheadings using as many digits as the ones used in national or regional subheadings, 8, 10, or more digits. For example, the EU used 8-digit regional codes, and as the EU wanted to specifically identify waste of polymers of polypropylene, sorry, can you please close the microphone? Thank you. I was saying, as the EU wants to use 8-digit regional codes for specifically identified waste of polypropylene, they expanded the international subheading 391590 to a regional 8-digit subheading 39159011 of polymers of polypropylene. So in that way, the EU has a specific HS code, regional HS code, for controlling waste of polypropylene. So countries can do the same. Countries are able to open as many national subheadings as necessary to identify specific plastic waste until 2028, when we have the amendment and we have specific HS codes. So countries can open specific national subheadings for the plastic waste mentioned in the Basel Convention, for example, Y48. In doing so, it may be convenient to narrow or define the undefined term of almost exclusively, because you need to enforce this waste during transit in customs, and you need to define what is considered almost exclusively. But not all plastic waste is produced in isolation. Most plastic waste is found mixed with other wastes. Mixed waste, including municipal waste and waste from chemicals or allied industries containing both plastic and non-plastic waste, are generally classified in heading 3825. The nomenclature defines, for example, municipal waste in Note 4 to Chapter 38, excluding certain type of waste such as industrial waste, clinical waste, pharmaceutical waste, which are also defined in Note 4K in Chapter 30 or Note 6A in Chapter 38. You can read the definition of clinical waste in this slide as defined in Note 6A to Chapter 38. Municipal waste is classified in subheading 382510, and clinical waste is classified 382530. As you can see, a lot of plastics are contained in this type of waste. So, as you are aware, certain kind of materials, for example, plastic articles, paper, glass, are separated from municipal waste or collected separately. In such cases, they are excluded from municipal waste, and the waste will fall in their appropriate headings in the nomenclature. In particular, plastic waste, when separated from municipal waste, is classified in heading 3915 as plastic waste and not as municipal waste. And as it was mentioned, in 1st January 2022, the harmonized system was amended, and electrical and electronic waste and scrap is classified under heading 8549. These wastes are classified in this heading whether or not containing plastics. Well, I hope the classification of plastic waste in the harmonized system is clearer to you, and thank you very much for your attention. I will stop sharing the screen.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I think one thing that is evident from your presentation is that the definition of what is a waste for the purpose of the harmonized system is itself not straightforward, right? And there are many notes and criteria that apply to the goods to define whether they can be classified as waste or not. So I think we don't have that much time left, and I am looking at the chat for some of the questions. Is there any questions to Daniel related specifically to his last presentation? Yeah, I urge you to take advantage that we have Daniel here with us because he's exceptionally placed to answer any questions related to the harmonized system. No, I am not seeing any. I've seen there's a question about whether e-waste for HS codes will be adapted to the new entries A1181 and Y49. As I've explained, this was we just obtained codes in HS 2022, and now contracting parties to the harmonized systems are just starting to use these codes. So the question is whether we need to change them again, and whether the current codes would not already be adapted to the amendments. So that's, I think, something to be considered. And then we have a question regarding POPs, but the new POPs. And as I mentioned, the chemicals listed under the Stockholm Convention are most of them listed under the Rotterdam Convention. Sometimes it takes a few years for this to happen. And the mandate that the Secretariat has is to request codes for the chemicals listed under the Rotterdam Convention, because it also needs to be remembered that the harmonized system applies to goods in trade, just as the Rotterdam Convention. So there is this parallel here that makes the work of devising proposal much easier. Whereas for the Stockholm Convention, sometimes the listings are let's say, less adapted. But generally speaking, we have codes for most Stockholm Convention POPs, chemicals. As to whether products containing POPs have codes, I think Daniel has addressed that earlier on already. I think the last question I see up here is about refuse-derived fuels, which is a mixture of different waste, and that there are no specific codes either in the Basel Convention or the HS for such waste. Well, and the question is whether these are there will be any specific codes to ensure full traceability and transparency in transboundary movements. I think some of the explanations given by Daniel about mixtures probably serves to answer that question partly. From the Secretariat side, we have not been requested to make proposals on such waste types. So at least, and I'm not aware of any such proposals myself from any other party. Maybe Daniel, if you know of something,
I was looking here. We have a specific code for waste oils, petroleum oils, which was already requested by the Basel Convention. No, I don't know if this is what they are looking for.
No, I think these are refuse-derived fuels, which is a mixture of shredded plastics, paper, timber, fabric, and other combustible wastes that are compressed into pellets and bales.
Oh, yeah, okay, yes.
No.
I only can say that the WCO is open to receive proposals from international conventions to try to implement these proposals into the harmonized system. However, as we have been discussing here, the terms should be well defined for a proper implementation. Just to illustrate one example, we have received proposals for opening a specific HS code for biodegradable plastic. But the problem was that we couldn't do that because there's no definition of what is biodegradable. 1 month, 1 year, 10 years, nobody can agree on what is the meaning of biodegradability. So for a convention or waste or something to be basically included in the harmonized system, and this is an enforceable convention, we need to define the terms. Once we have something which is well defined, it is better, it is to be implemented and to be put into HS codes.
Well, I don't see any other questions, and I've seen several requests for sharing the presentations, and we will do that after the webinar. We will send them to all registered participants. So on that note, let me again thank Daniel for being present with us today and sharing with us all his knowledge about this complex tool that is the harmonized system. And yes, and thank you for joining us. And do not hesitate to write to me and to Daniel in case you have any further questions. So good evening, good afternoon, wherever your day takes you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.